Good morning, my friends. Today we're going to be learning the 5th chapter in the laws of idol worship. We are continuing on from the discussion that we had yesterday about a city that veers off and starts to serve idols. Today we are discussing when you have an individual who is proselytizing and trying to convince people to serve an idol. So whether this is in the form of just a regular person, a friend or a family member who comes and tries to convince someone that they should go and start serving a false god, or whether it's talking about the person who says that they are a prophet of a certain god, and or if God told or they say that God told them that they should go and serve idols. In whatever case, that person would be classified as a proselytizer and would ultimately be brought to the high court and be put to death. So today we're going to be learning the laws in regards to such a person who comes and tries to convince Jewish people to stop believing in God. So this is a very fundamental idea in our belief system, that we are only believing in God, and therefore if anyone comes to try to take that away from us, God forbid, it's not going to be fun for them. So the idea is that if you have a person, doesn't matter who it is, but a Jewish person, so whether a man or a woman, whoever it is, who comes and proselytizes and tries to convince people to come and serve another god, whether or not the person actually did it, to go and bow down or do a certain action for that god, it doesn't matter. Whoever it was who tries to come and convince someone, that person is going to be classified as a proselytizer and ultimately will be put to death. Now, there are two types of proselytizers, as we already have learned yesterday. There's another type, which is someone who comes to try and convince an entire city. So, to convince an entire city is it's classified differently in Jewish law. That's called a madiach. That's someone who is trying to convince a greater amount of people, versus a masis, as it's called, which is someone who is trying to come and convince just either one or a few people. So the bottom line is that if a person comes and he says, or she says, let us go and serve a certain idol, let us go and bring a sacrifice for a certain other god, so then that person who was being spoken to, who was trying to be convinced, so then they will go to the high court and they will tell them, listen, this person is trying to convince me to go and serve an idol, and I obviously don't want to do this, but they are pressuring me into it. So the truth is that this is one of the mitzvahs where we find that we will try to bring them to the high court and try to find them liable. In other words, that even if we don't have witnesses for this, we obviously need to have witnesses. So what we do is that Jewish law tells that person who was being spoken to go and get two people, and either to tell the proselytizer that I have some friends who are also interested in wanting to hear about what you have to say, and then ultimately those other people will be able to be witnesses when they'll hear what they have to say, or that the person who was being spoken to should hide two witnesses back somewhere hiding, and they're able to see what's going on, and then again to tell the proselytizer, so tell me again, what was it that you wanted us to do? And then the person will tell them the various details of going to serve these false idols, and then they'll be able to come out, these two witnesses, and have this witness and be able to go to the court and tell them what happens. So if the person backs out, so then we're good. If these witnesses are standing there and the person, the person will say, well, let's go and serve these idols or whatever, and then the person will say, but one second, don't we believe in God? God says that we shouldn't serve idols. And so if he was quiet, so then we're good. But if the person says, no, forget about God, let's go serve these idols, so then they will bring that person to court, and they will put him to death. And the truth is that the person who was being proselytized to has the mitzvah to kill the mesit themselves, to kill the proselytizer themselves. As it says in the verse in Deuteronomy, your hand must be the first against them to kill them. And there are various laws in regards to this, in the idea that we're not allowed to love the proselytizer, as it says in the Torah. We're not allowed to help them. We're not allowed to listen to them. And we are not allowed to pity them. And therefore, and if the person knows another piece of evidence, they should not hold themselves back from saying it to make matters just. And as it says in the verse, and all of Israel will hear, and they will become afraid. In other words, they should understand that this is, and that no one should be doing such evil things, and the person who was proselytized to should not be afraid of this person, of the proselytizer, and should know what his position is, and should give the witness and say exactly what took place to make sure that they get the correct sentence for what they deserve. If a person tells other people, come and worship me, come, I am a god, so then if they actually did it, so then they get killed. But if they didn't end up doing it, so then he's okay, he's off the hook. Now, what about a person who is a false prophet? The person comes and says that a certain, either God told me that we should go serve idols, or a certain idol or whoever told me that we should go serve idols. This is going to be classified as a classical false prophet, and they will get killed. Even though they might have said something which might have had some truth in it, or they might have made some miraculous wonders, it doesn't matter. Whatever the case is, if a person comes and ever says that we should go and serve idols, we know that they are talking lies, because the Torah clearly spells out and says that if it were to come and a person will come and tell you, let us go and serve idols, you will know that they are not talking the truth, and this is not a real, God is not ever going to say such a thing, and therefore you will know that they are lying. And we're not supposed to get into any discussions or debates with that person in regards to the idea of going to worship an idol, and we're not allowed to start thinking, well, maybe he is saying the truth, maybe he's doing some pretty cool stuff, he's doing some miracles, maybe that person is talking the truth. So that's something which we're not allowed. We're not allowed to contemplate the fact that they might be talking the truth, because the Torah clearly says that this is definitely not true, but rather that person should be brought to the high court and ultimately will be put to death, and the Torah spells that out pretty straightforwardly. Similarly, the idea of a false prophet doesn't only apply to going to serve false idols. It actually is in regards to every idea of a prophecy, where you can have someone says a prophecy which never happened, and then they didn't actually get that prophecy, or if they are saying over a prophecy that another prophet heard, and they're just speaking it over and saying it as if they themselves got it, that is also going to be classified as a false prophet. Anyone who is going to say, well, listen, if this guy is a prophet, well, maybe he is a false prophet, but it's still in a certain place, on a certain level, they still have a level of prophecy, and will be scared of going against them, and won't want to witness against them or bring them to court. So the Torah clearly says that we should not fear them, and we should do exactly what has to be done. Now, once we understand this general concept, which this is the main bulk of the chapter, now the Rambam goes along and he tells us that in general, a person is not supposed to be speaking or thinking about idol worship. So therefore, a person, when let's say a person takes a vow or an oath, they're not allowed to do it on the base of an idol. In other words, you can't be taking an oath under the name of a certain false god, and we're not allowed to do this, and neither are we supposed to even be speaking about it. So let's say a person is going to tell their friend, I want to meet you at a certain spot, let's meet at that idol, or something like that. So that's something which we're not allowed to do either, because we should not be talking and mentioning in our life these various false gods. Unless we're talking about a certain idol which is mentioned in the Torah, so that's something which we're allowed to talk about, but we're obviously not allowed to serve them or do anything with them, as the Torah clearly tells us that those are idols and we should only believe in God and not in anything else. And a person is not going to be actually liable by getting lashes unless they make a vow or an oath in the name of the false god. But in general, as Jewish people, we always want to speak about God, and the truth is that in general it's a very positive idea. If we're going to look on the other side of the spectrum, that what we are supposed to do is that the name of God should always be in our lips. So if a person asks us how we're doing, we should always say thank God. We should always be thanking God for whatever is taking place in our life. And one of the reasons why we say shalom, for instance, when we greet people, we say shalom, is because shalom is one of the names of God. And when we greet someone, we want to greet them with the name of God. So the name of other gods we should never mention, but the name of God we always should. And God has great pleasure from when we speak about His name and when we mention it. So that's the reason why we say shalom, by greeting people with the name of God. Or similarly, when someone asks us how we're doing, how is life, so we should always thank God for what is going on in our life. So with that, we complete the chapter for today, where we learn about how a person should never go and tell someone else and try to veer them off the correct path of serving God and trying to get them to serve an idol. That is a terrible sin. And on the contrary, we are supposed to have a very strong belief, and we should be trying to get people to believe in God rather than the opposite. So with that, we complete the chapter for today. We will continue tomorrow, God willing. I hope you're all doing well, and we will see you. All the best.